Welcome everybody. My name is Eleanor Dawson. I'm an organiser for the Writers Guild of Great Britain, and I am absolutely thrilled to be co-hosting this panel discussion today with the New Black Film Collective. And for those of you who don't know us or are unfamiliar with our work, the Writers Guild of Great Britain are the trade union for professional writers in the UK. Our members work in TV, film, theatre, audio, books, poetry, comedy, animation, and video games. Our members include emerging and aspiring writers, including students, as well as professional writers and writers working in various spheres as their professional careers. We work to secure better pay and working conditions for writers, and we also campaign and lobby on a wide range of issues that affect writers and the creative industries. Before we start, I'm just delighted to introduce my co-host for today's panel discussion, Priscilla. Priscilla, if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the New Black Film Collective.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. I'm so pleased to be partnering with you in this event. This is absolutely fantastic, and to be in front of so much talent. I am Priscilla Igwe, the founder CEO of the New Black Film Collective, and we're here to primarily serve Black audiences and support Black talent. We're a nationwide membership network, and we work throughout the screen industries. So yeah, we're very pleased to be here tonight with this amazing pioneering women, Black women in the writing sphere. And yes, can't wait to get on with the session.
Thank you so much, Priscilla. And finally, we are so excited to be joined today by three of the UK's most exciting writers. We're joined today by Matilda Feyiṣayọ Ibini, Jackie Okwera, and Tosin Otudeko. Thank you all so much for being here today. So, first of all of you have had very different journeys into your writing careers, from playwriting, from being in a writer's room or leading a writer's room, to creating films and TV series. Between the three of you, you've pretty much done it all. First of all, it would be really great if you would be able to tell us a little bit about how you got started as a writer and how you've got to where you are now. And can I ask Tosin that question first?
Hi, thank you, Eleanor, and it's great to meet everybody, and it's great to be here. So I got into writing from a mild obsession with theatre. So I enjoyed creating, watching, writing, yeah, just everything to do with theatre. And then I tried to make a career out of it for the last 20 years. So that's still ongoing, so I'll let you know how that goes when I get there. In between that, I segued into TV and film, so writing for an adaptation, the adaptation of Desperate Housewives, an African adaptation of it in Nigeria, and then a commissioned film called The Wedding Party, and then my own film called Over the Bridge, which dealt with male mental health in the corporate space. I think throughout my journey, I've realized that I've always been drawn to stories from the continent. So obviously stories from where I grew up, stories that I'm passionate about, and being able to tell that on a global scale. And yeah, and I'm still on that journey of doing that.
Thank you so much, Tosin. Jackie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jackie, obviously. Yeah, I started out in a different way. I started out first of all in production, being a runner, and then I worked on all the soaps in continuing drama, sort of coming up through the script editing ranks, and then went in-house development-wise, working for Nicholas Schindler at Red, Patrick, Kudos, and working with various people like Harlan Coben and Jed Mercurio, and lots of great writers who gave me lots of inspiration and kind of taught me a lot about the business. But I always wanted to write, but at the time, not to age myself, I didn't see a lot of people who were writing stories. People who look like me, writing stories from places where I come from. I was born in Uganda, but I lived in Yorkshire, and I kind of always felt like I was kind of caught between two worlds and sort of fish out of water. So then I did, when I had my child and I was on maternity leave, and wrote a spec script for Emmerdale. And luckily they gave me a 6-step commission so I could kind of pay my mortgage and leave my job. And then, yeah, so I started writing from there, into doing lots of different writers' rooms as well as my own projects. Worked for HBO, Disney, Netflix, Channel 4, most of the most of the different broadcasters. And yeah, now I'm kind of creating my own shows, and I've just done my first feature film as well with the BFI. That's me.
Thank you so much. And Matilda, can you tell us a little bit about your journey into writing?
Hey everyone, I'm Matilda. Bear with, I have a bit of a stress cold, so seeing how long I can go without getting a coughing fit. Um, yeah, I started out in theatre. Similar to Tosin, I developed an extreme love of theatre through poetry. I got really excited at the concept of putting words in people's mouths and getting them to say things. Um, through poetry, through poetry into theatre. I did literature and creative writing undergrad at uni. We only did one term on theatre, was obsessed, and I was like, how do I do more of this? And at the time, probably giving my age away, the government was still subsidizing a lot of theatres. When that stopped, a lot of outreach programs and courses disappeared, sadly, or became paid courses. Then, encouraged by a friend, when I graduated uni, I was working in a charity, not knowing how do you make a career as a writer. A friend was like, "Oh, look up the journeys of your favorite writers," and noticed that they'd all done some kind of postgrad in writing for performance, writing for broadcast, and I was like, I don't have 10 grand lying behind the sofa to pay for this postgrad. Kind of by chance, ancestral intervention, who knows? I've discovered the BAFTA scholarships, which still exist today. They cover scholarships, any undergrads or postgraduate degrees that cover film, TV, games, animation. And so I got you first had to get a place on a course. So I found a course that did both playwriting and screenwriting, masters, and then I applied for a BAFTA scholarship, which I then got, which then really kind of kickstarted my career for me in terms of creating a portfolio, because that's one of the biggest things I think I learned that I needed. It wasn't enough to have written just one play or one spec script. I needed to have a portfolio of work that I could show people, whether it was a TV idea that was at a pitch stage, or just a treatment stage, or a film that was at treatment stage, or an early draft of something that unfortunately writing unpaid is what then leads to paid work. So that's kind of how I got my start.
Thank you so much, Matilda. It's been so fantastic to hear about all of your careers and all of the very, very varied ways that you've all managed to get your foot in the door. So just actually, in some respects, coming on from a point that Matilda's just made about funding, which is that we keep hearing at the Guild about the so-called crisis in film and TV funding and the challenges that are involved in making work in the current economic climate. And I'd be really interested to hear what the three of you think are some of the biggest barriers for up-and-coming writers at the moment. I don't know if anybody wants to dive in and take that question first.
Yeah, I will. I think, as you probably all know, it is a very tricky market at the moment. I guess the sort of biggest thing is the commissioners are risk averse at the moment. And so it's really hard if you're a newer writer who's coming in who hasn't done various different shows, written episodes on people's shows or whatever, or who's already got a ready-made audience out there. You put your work out there. So I would say they're looking for a lot of kind of authored work. By that they mean someone who's probably had a track records. But one thing I do think that's counteracts that, like people like Curry Barker, who is now the hottest thing in Hollywood from putting his own stuff out on YouTube. And I think people are much more entrepreneurial now and kind of trying to get around those kind of, if you can do that, whatever you can, not having to wait for a gatekeeper to tell you that you are a writer, and getting your work seen or doing those shorts and so forth. I find that a lot of commissioners are still looking in that way and kind of seeing who's doing that kind of work themselves. So it is, I would say that's probably the biggest thing for a new writer to kind of break through. And I think what Matilda said is really great as well, in terms of having that portfolio, not just pictures, actual written scripts as well. I keep saying to people, like, write the script. Don't wait until, if you're a new writer, don't wait until you're kind of you've got that option. Just write it and have those scripts there. And also that's the fun part, being able to write the script without kind of having to kind of go, we can't afford all of that, and kind of getting stuck in that loop. So yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, I kind of echo everything Jackie said. I think as someone who's disabled, I'm a wheelchair user. So one of the barriers a lot of disabled writers face isn't just it's often having just the time, energy, and financial stability to develop work. We're in a time where people are, yes, less risk averse. And when we hear less risk averse, that means less Black and people of color, less disabled, often more heterosexual work. Like it's a kind of a return, or in some ways, it feels like a regression back to that long ago, actually, when it felt like the industry didn't want to hear from people like ourselves. I think it's important that for me, one of the biggest, if I could tell people one of the biggest things I've learned in this career is to not sacrifice your physical or mental health for the sake of the work. That this industry is more than happy to chew you up and spit you out. And actually, one of the things you've got to do is actually protect yourself and protect your peace. That no work you make will ever be more important than you as a human being. So don't do the starving artist thing. Actually find work that covers the bills, covers the essentials, and find pockets of time to write. So if you can't write every day, because most people can't anyway, if it's that 15 minutes of your break, if you can do that 2 to 3 times a week, the pages will start to add up. So finding pockets of time rather than beating yourself up that you can't write for 5 hours every day. I can't write for 5 hours every day. So trying to develop habits that work around the realities of your life, and that keeping a roof over your health and eating is far more important than getting the work made. I'm sorry, you won't be able to make work when you're sick or in hospital, you know. Yeah, and funding is hard at the moment. So something that I've noticed a lot is people getting more creative with how they fund their work. In terms of whether it's crowdfunding. One of the things that they say when making like your first short is you beg, borrow, and steal. So you beg for, ask every favor under the sun, go back to your school if you have to your secondary school, ask for favors for locations, what have you, to get the work made. You'd be surprised what people and communities are willing, resources they're willing to offer up if they know what it's going towards. So in some ways, I'm saying 2 things: try not to let funding become a barrier, but also I'm acknowledging that it is a barrier.
Yeah, totally. I so agree with what both Jackie and Matilda you've just said, particularly your point about just keeping your mental health up, because we all want to write. We've come into this because we're so passionate about it, but it can take over, and it can take over our lives, and sometimes cloud the extent to which we will go to need for us to get our projects made, our films made. And I know, Eleanor, you said sort of the funding crisis in the current climate, but I'll probably argue that there's probably always been a funding crisis in general for as long as I have known and wanted to write. And now, of course, it's further impacted by the way audiences now consume content. So that's now, just like Jack and Matilda have said, that's now what's forcing commissioners to be just a little bit more choosy, because at the end of the day, it just depends on what's getting funded. So, and they're also looking at the audience, what the audience are watching, and so the decisions are being made, and it's changing at this exponential rate as well. So, yeah, I think it's equally as difficult, of course, when you are from a certain demographic, and and the cultural barriers that go with that. So just like both Jackie and Matilda have said, we've almost got to flip it, where we're not seeing it as a barrier, but it's seen as an opportunity to establish newer networks, opportunity to build on relations that we currently have, opportunity to make use of our diaspora network as well, as much as we can, for those who are from multiple sort of different heritages and backgrounds, because that can really come in handy when we're building our communities as well. And also attending festivals, attending content markets as well. What that does is that it puts you in the in the mind. It enables you to have direct relationships, which you will build over time, but direct relationships with streamers, with sales agents, etc., that you may eventually at some point be able to pitch your work to. So being more inventive is probably key to overcoming the barriers that we face now.
Can I just pick up on Tosin's point now, actually, which is really good, especially if you're all Black from the global majority. They are, a lot of those kind of overseas broadcasters are looking and have the money as well to do things, and they're working co-pros. And for instance, I had a call to my agent about studio canals, wanted to do more sort of African projects. I had a project that basically no one would make in a traditional broadcast, even though it went to do the rounds, because it takes place between Uganda and Kenya, and it's supernatural. But Uganda, sorry, New York, and it's supernatural. But they were like, Studio Canal now are trying to kind of do more with African projects, and there's lots of different, and they're working with those established channels over there as well. So don't just think you have to go to the, the sort of legacy brands as well. Think outside the box.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for that, everybody. And just to kind of pick up on some of the points that you've all made, and to ask a similar but also quite different question, which is that we often hear about writers' career progression being quite uneven, and that there can be real peaks and troughs in the career of a writer, and it's not always a straightforward linear movement. I'd be fascinated to hear what you think the barriers are which shape who gets to build a sustainable long-term career as a writer.
Don't mind starting one. I'd often say this in like workshops that I've done, that like disabled writers, but I'd argue that this probably applies to all kind of marginalized groups, that part of our careers is often being, unfortunately, forced to wear other hats. So there are times in your career where you're going to find yourself, oh my God, I'm a producer now, because the one finding the directors, working with the actors to negotiate fees or budgets, or I'm filling in funding applications or grants applications. I'm trying to make sure whatever I'm working on, people have the access requirements met. So I'm advocating in a way. Sometimes on projects, I'll find myself almost consulting of like, oh, we've never worked with a disabled writer before. And I'm like, okay, it's not just about working with me, it's about making sure you're able to work with other disabled writers, because they will work differently from myself. That there is something about this patchwork career, is how I've heard it described, that at different points I've had different roles other than solely writer. I think when I started out, I was just like, I want to be a writer. I want someone to pay me to write scripts, to tell stories, and that's it. I'll be done. Or I'll write one thing, it will blow, and I'll never have to write again. And that could not be further from the reality in terms of learning. A lot of those hats, you're going to learn the skills of that. Yes, the first funding application I ever wrote got rejected, but then I had to rewrite it, work on it, get feedback from people who are a bit more experienced, and then resubmitted it, and it was successful. So there are all these other skills that I didn't know I would need, that I learned along the way of my career. And that I think like talent isn't the only, often people think, oh, I've got one great story, one great idea, that's it. Talent isn't the only thing of this, the only part of the equation of having a career. It's about, in some ways, being really strategic, being really organized, following up with people, finishing work. That's the biggest thing. When people are like, how do I get my work out there? Is it finished? Are you done? And one draft is not enough. Like, I used to have a 6 draft minimum, like before I send it out to anyone. And 6 is a lot, but it meant that it'd been through like rigorous redrafting and thinking and marinating and things like that. Just writing the first draft and sending it out there thinking someone's going to make it is, no, that's not the way to go. So yeah, I think like it's okay, and also not comparing. That's the biggest thing as well. Stable writer, not comparing my career to other people's. It won't be the same. We're not leading the same lives. We don't have the same responsibilities. Why should our careers be the same? So kind of feeling validated that my career is just as worthy, even if it doesn't look like other people's careers. Yeah.
Yeah, so I really resonate with what you've said. I feel persistence is such a key, it's such a key factor, attribute for us as writers, and yeah, possibly having an income while you're still writing if you haven't been able to get that commission or script lab or that opportunity or to get your work funded, alongside all the other things that we're doing and like the multiple hats. I think maybe the traditional models were probably more based on, in the UK at least, investing in talent over medium to long term. And then through the writer development programs, labs, and competitions, then the writer gets to develop their craft in that, or developing their craft on a long running series. So the usual entry points. And what I find is that the studios will inevitably go back to the talent that they have already supported or that they have invested in. It's just easier. And that way it makes it appear as though the power is in the hands of the studios with respect to a writer developing a sustainable career. But now, because everything is changing, again, because of how the audiences are consuming our content, I think it's also changing the way commissioners are investing in the talent, and particularly in who they invest in. So yeah, and as much as we keep trying to see these are ways that we can flip it and become more creatively entrepreneurial, it does present challenges because we're being asked to write, but at the same time, we're also being asked to be social media influencers, and we're asked to be producers and everything else. So a funny story, I was talking to my brother and I was telling him about all the things that I had going on. I've got to do this, I've got to attend this, I've got to so I'm signing up for this and I'm on this program, but what I really want to do is write. And then he said, but why don't you just write? And I said, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to schedule 2 weeks in July that I'm going to write. But before then, I've got to do this and I've got to do this and I've got to do this. It's almost like we have to build the infrastructure just to be able to write, particularly when the infrastructure isn't that accessible. So yeah, so it is very varying at this point in time. And then there's the thing about mid-career writers as well. You've done one project and then you've got this long wait or long pitching sessions, endless pitching sessions before the next one. And you kind of just have to find a way just to keep that blood boiling, keep being engaged, with other writers, with a community, joining a guild, for instance. I think that's always a great idea. Joining through the guild, you can join a committee, you can be part of a subcommittee, and there's also networks. So various entry points where you can feel part of that community. The New Black Film Collective, TNBFC, excellent organization. I've attended some of your events as well, Priscilla. And again, just that, and for me, that just keeps me alive between my writing time. These are things that I know I must keep doing. First of all, because you're meeting people and you're learning, and then and then that just gives you more of the motivation in a sense, just to go back and finish that script.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you both said. As we touched upon earlier, unfortunately, we are slightly going backwards where, with the risk-averse kind of nature we're in at the moment, as you'll look at those announcements on the whatever press sites, and you'll see the same kind of 6 people who keep getting kind of commissioned, and it is because they want to go to those safe names. So yeah, everything that you guys have said, like, it's even also, I did another panel last week for Screen Yorkshire, and a lot of new writers were saying their big question was, how do I get an agent? An agent, of course, is important, but I would actually say probably 60% of my work that I get is not from my agent, it's from me. Networking, keeping up those relationships, even if you've met somebody, I don't know, a year ago, touch base with them, going to all these different events, and just kind of that you've got to have that hustle mentality, unfortunately, at the moment, in terms of, no one's going to a lot of people will forget you because there are so many people who are out of work. So just kind of keep cultivating all those different avenues that you can, so that you're not just relying on your agent to get you the work.
Thank you so much, everybody. And can I just say, for the record as well, that given how much you are all doing at any one time, and how much you're all juggling at any one time, the fact that firstly, that you're here with us this evening is wonderful, but also the fact that you managed to find time to get involved with your union and with the work that the Guild is doing is just so fantastic. And it's great to be able to work alongside you. I'm now going to raise a topic which is on everybody's lips at the moment and on everybody's minds, particularly in the writing community, which is AI. As everyone will know, AI is a really big topic that the Writers Guild are engaging with at the moment, and which writers across the UK and indeed across the world are engaging with as well. So the rise of generative AI is one of the biggest issues that writers are facing at the moment. Has anybody on the panel seen an increase in the use of artificial intelligence in their working lives? And if so, how are you navigating this?
Oh, I'll go. I think, I feel like at the moment there's this coordinated kind of various different celebrities who are saying AI is inevitable, it's inevitable, inevitable. It feels like there's like this coordinated kind of scheme to get us all to feel like AI is going to take over our lives. But I feel like at the moment I've not seen as much in terms of from the writing side or from the people that I'm working with. Obviously, there's things where people say, I don't know, you've got to write a treatment and you get it to kind of help you kind of get things down and whatever and things like that. But I've not seen as much in terms of the idea generation creeping in yet in terms of obviously I'm working with kind of, established companies and things like that. So they're not saying that at the moment anyway. But so I'm not seeing it, but I think more so in terms of production and probably behind the scenes, there is some kind of AI infiltration, but I don't see it personally on a day-to-day basis affecting me as yet. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it's quite interesting what you say, because yes, this threat is looming and it's the elephant in the room, isn't it? But you're right, possibly at this very stage, I think, and certainly depends on which producer you're working with and which organization. I believe we're still valuing or appropriating value to the human writing, and the craft of writing and the importance of us retaining that as for as long as possible, before before things take a dramatic change, before the unsaid happens. But I think the greatest threats will probably be and the discussions that are happening in certain departments, or that me as a writer I would be concerned about would be obviously AI replacing my work, there being even less work now than there was before, and almost having to be forced to work with an AI as my script developer. So those two issues, I think, would be things that I would be very, very wary about. So getting AI to write the script, and then I, as the writer, then has to fine tune it. I would find that very problematic. So I suppose choosing where you're working, and again, like in an already shrinking pool, that then starts to present its challenges. But I do believe that there is still hope on the horizon, just like with luxury goods. I think you'll always find the copies, but the luxury goods should always be priced higher than the copies. So that's my belief. So I think we're waiting to see how it's unfolding, but I think we as writers are also making choices day by day to retain as much originality in our work as possible. And I would use AI if I'm trying to come up with a budget or I'm asking for things. I'll be very wary with outrightly using AI to running my synopsis or elements of my idea, even trying to do character development with AI as well. I believe some commissioners and companies won't accept your work, particularly if you're applying to competitions, if there is any element of AI in it as well. So it's just things that we also need to consider as writers based on what is considered original in our contract. And so various layers of this unfolding unfolding situation that we have with AI, but we are watching with interest, I think.
Matilda, if you've got any thoughts on AI to add to that, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, especially as I say recently, but semi-recently, I've been researching into it for a project that I'm writing around robotics and social care. But one of the things I think for me is often being concerns around, I guess, like consent and copyright and the value of human creativity, because that feels like that's what connects audiences to work that we create is the kind of lived experience, our perspective, and human insight, which, at least from what I've seen on social media, especially the things that go viral, AI is not able to replicate. It's not able to replicate that humanness. And so I don't think it's not, it's not an issue I would say that I've been facing as a writer at this moment. But it's just one that I'm monitoring, kind of like what Tosin said, monitoring, because I see it come up again and again of like someone is advertising an entire book that's been written via AI, and it's poorly written because AI doesn't have an editor, an internal edit, like that kind of stuff. A thing that has been coming up is when I've been trying to make like pitch decks and pictures for treatments and things. One of the things I've been actually struggling with is being able to tell whether an image is AI generated or not, because I'll search and search and search thinking, okay, I've gotten this off someone's website, or I can find the original source material. And when I try and like maybe use Google image reverse search, that's when you discover, oh, this is AI generated. And I'm like, for flip's sake, I'm trying to avoid putting it in my work but it's getting more and more. The worry for me is that it's getting more and more sophisticated. It's getting harder to tell. So images, videos are still a bit, you can kind of tell with moving images, but still images are getting a lot harder to dispel, which is where I feel like the consent and copyright comes into it, of not unknowing, part of the development period is sometimes finding images to try and illustrate the world or the characters. Usually I'll use actors that I know, have heard of in my treatments and pitches and pitch deck. But I'm now having to be conscious of whether or not this is an AI generated image. I'm working harder to find the source of where that image came from, which is not something I had to worry about like 5 years ago. I could just copy and paste an image and it was fine. So yeah, it is something that is constantly in the kind of background. And I also wonder if it's a kind of canary in a coal mine kind of thing of, we think AI is going to take over, but I'm not actually sure. I feel like there are far too many human agents behind AI with very nefarious agendas who are just kind of using AI as a kind of smokescreen for the actual things that they want to be able to get away with. Yeah, it is something that is, a very hot conversation at the moment. I'm sorry, I don't have very, very clear answers because I'm not always sure I know. I'm not always sure I thought I knew what AI was. I used to have my own kind of understanding of AI, and I feel like I've had that recently challenged. And I'm like, oh, I thought I knew AI, and it's not what I thought, kind of thing.
Thank you so much for those insights, everyone. That's been really fantastic. So we have got one last question before we start taking any audience questions. And just a reminder for everybody listening, if you do have any questions, please do put them in the chat and we will start pulling your questions out for the panelists. But just one final quick round one for you all before we go to that. If each of you could see one practical change in the next 12 months to help writers, what would that change be? And I'm going to go to Tosin first on this one.
Okay. One practical change is if we can make it a level playing field. So, and by that I mean the only way you can actually develop your craft is to write, but there aren't opportunities to write, particularly when you're starting out. So, almost borrowing from the Alan Milburn's neat policy document, which is empowering companies, empowering organizations to be able to take on at any level writers on various level on schemes, apprenticeship style schemes, just to enable them to get off that rung of the ladder. The onus doesn't only have to be on the production companies. If government is able to help to get this, to really empower a lot of companies. And again, I think not even just the traditional commissioners and the traditional funding bodies that we are used to. I think even extending that conversation to streamers, etc. So just getting a much wider range of writers different levels and demographics onto these schemes and continuing it on a rollout basis, I think this at least it just gets us it gets us into a place where we're not limited. We're not kind of all working through that bottleneck of getting your film made, getting your film sold, even trying to write or getting your first job on a program, where you're just leveling the playing field a little bit for writers. I know this was a very long-winded way of of answering a quick fire question, but yeah, making it a level playing field and increasing access.
Yeah, it's similar. I was going to say more funding, obviously, which is great, but more in terms of specifically ring fence funding for newer projects and kind of, however that works, whether it's BBC Charter or whatever, but that is not for, that established whatever. It's for people who, rather than just, because sometimes I think we get stuck in schemes, I have like a love-hate relationship with them, because sometimes it's like, well, we're doing the scheme and we've got this writer over here, and then that person goes off into the wilderness. So actual positions in rooms, an episode, things like that, where it's back to kind of that ring fence spending because it's a talk that's going on at the moment, especially for women as well, because we've gone back to more male writers getting commissions, but just kind of them looking strategically like that.
Be a bit cheeky and say a couple, but really quickly. Money, yeah, too much essential creative labor happens unpaid, and the fee is so little for the work that you're then going to go on to do. So actual fees that reflect the length and breadth of the work that writers have to do, including research time, for example. For disabled writers specifically, I'd like to see more access to funding where access is embedded into every stage of development and production rather than treated as an add-on. But access is seen as core, as costume, as core, as music, that it's a core line of the budget when thinking about working with anyone, because it shouldn't have to be, we'll wait till we work with a disabled person. Everyone has access requirements, irrespective if you're disabled or not. And if it was the norm that there was always an access budget, you'd be surprised how many more people would come forward about being comfortable about sharing about their access requirements and kind of destigmatizing the way we see disabled creatives. And my last one would be, which is a little controversial, I think quotas, because one of the things I think I've noticed, at least from my time in the industry, is we have a government and industry that loves to debate, that loves to hold, sadly to say, panels, discussions. And I'm like, what do we do? How do we do the thing? How do we get more Black writers, more women writers, more queer writers, more disabled writers? We're going to have to start with quotas, because people aren't doing what they say they want to do. Talk about it, they'll talk you to death about it, and then do nothing. And I'm like, well, if it became an annual quota that if you do not meet 25% of female writers can commission, women writers commissioned, 25% disabled writers commissioned, you lose funding. If you have to then meet these quotas to keep your funding, because I feel like it's been too long that there are no consequences for not being inclusive. There are no consequences for not having diversity across the board in organizations and commissioners. And I feel like we need to make it hurt. We need to make it hurt to not be inclusive, to not work with us, to not want to work with us. When we make up the population, we make up the world. And I feel like quotas is the first step. It's not the solution, but we would see the change that we want, that we're all talking about. But just allowing people to, like, every year they'll go and do that TV conference and someone will give a fantastic speech, and then in 2 years' time, nothing's changed. We still don't have any tangible, visible change. And I feel like quotas might be a good start.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much to the three of you for answering my questions. I'm now going to pass over to Priscilla, who is going to give us a handful of questions from the audience.
Apologies, I was on mute. What a what a rookie. Yes, so we have about 5 questions in the chat. I'll say one has just sort of stood out for me. Have you used a solicitor to protect your work or be involved in an agreement? If so, at what point can you talk about this side of things? Who would like to take that one?
Not necessarily. So in America, you would a lot of the time if you're an American writer, you'd have a solicitor, you'd have a lawyer who would do your contracts and so forth. But I haven't had to get to that point. I've spoken to somebody about actually through the Writers Guild, which was very helpful, someone for legal advice, but I've not actually had to employ a solicitor. So I don't know if anyone else has.
Well, I've worked with a solicitor on my projects, but also because I'm working to draft agreements as a producer as well for other line creatives in the production. So yes, I have worked with, I've sought advice from a solicitor. I've also sought advice from the Writers Guild as well, sought legal advice from them when I was working on a musical. So yeah, I'm trying to recall the question. Is this basically whether or not we found it helpful, or how we've worked with the solicitor in drafting our agreements, or in the instance of disputes?
I think areas of copyright and agreements, I think, kind of protecting yourself, I
Yeah.
think the question is coming from.
Yeah. I mean, it is useful. That's exactly what they're there for. But obviously they come with a cost. So if you're able to seek advice prior to actually hiring one, again, and we've mentioned that is one of the benefits of being part of the guild. And and of course you can ask ChatGPT, and you have to be careful the sort of answer response that you get from that. But yeah, but very much yes, yeah. I think I would say working with a professional organization where you're able to get some professional legal advice from before the outlay of getting a solicitor, and at the point where it's absolutely necessary. Or if you are also working as a producer as well, then yes, I think it does become important to have a lawyer on your team.
I'd also add to that as well. If you have got an agent, what is your agent doing? Because that's what they should be doing, fighting your corner, negotiating your treatments. Obviously, if you haven't got an agent, then that's different. But
Awesome. Shall we take a couple of more questions? Is there enough time? Brilliant. Oh, I like this one. This is a bit saucy. I like this one. I don't think it's saucy, but don't mind me. Is there any underlying anxiety amongst writers around the idea that AI will be used to tell your stories for you by those outside your identity or community? For example, as a Black woman or someone with a disability or a member of the LGBTQ community. Hmm. Is there such a thing as AI face or something? I don't know.
So I think there's definitely a risk that we will be misrepresented in a variety of ways, as we already are being, just in terms of just the language, some of the things that we're already seeing being that we witness when we do interact with them with the AI, the machine. But what I think will eventually happen, I would say not so much anxiety, because it's tempered by the fact that I truly believe that eventually it's going to it's the commission, well, those who are decision makers at the end of the day are following the money, and the money is going to be dictated by what the audience want. And I believe that just the entire ecosystem is based on what we value in terms of what we want to see. And once the audiences themselves are not wanting to watch things that are not authentic or misrepresenting people, and just basically what they don't feel is true storytelling, then we're going to find less and less of that, less and less of those types of projects or those things being seen, and hopefully less commissioners wanting to put that in, or including that in any of their in any sort of projects that they seek to fund. So I just feel like it kind of goes like the inauthenticity, I feel, will be caught out at the end of the day. That's what I think.
Excellent. We hope that's true.
Yeah, we really do.
Okay. Another question, and I think this was sort of touched upon, but this question really goes for it. From Alice Charles, no one seems prepared to address why there's been so little movement on writers' pay. Unless you're Jack Thorne or Andrew Davis, it's impossible to make a living as a writer in England. Is that true?
Yes. I would
Painfully true.
wholeheartedly, unfortunately, not to get too personal, obviously, because we're recording this as well. I've seen a big drop in my pay as well. And don't get me wrong, I'm very lucky I'm still working and so forth. But yeah, and even people trying to undercut you, it's just the way it is. And because I think it's, which is hopefully, with the Writers Guild and people like that trying to put more pressure. But I'm a Writers Guild of America member as well, and they're much more obviously very militant over there. That wouldn't be allowed over there because they have a lot of power there, and the guild does a lot of good work. And sometimes it gets frustrating because it's just the way it is. I wish we got paid more, but unfortunately I don't think it's gonna. I think it's only gonna kind of plateau. I think, unfortunately, unless, like you were saying, the top people who are listed will get paid more.
It's painfully true. And one of the things that I've been doing that I find helpful before signing anything is trying to find any writer friends to ask, does this fee sound good? So we're comparing our fees so we know if someone is, like you say, Jackie, trying to undercut you or pay you differently because they think, oh, you've not got enough writers' room experience or you've not got enough credits or what have you. So pay transparency is something I feel like even within like community of writers are really good at doing. So if you're ever unsure about what your pay should be, reaching out to the guild or reaching out to other writers who may have had work on to just be like, hey, is this a good fee for X amount of work or for, this type of work? Because it also really differs across mediums as well. That's the thing as well, that sometimes I'll get paid really well in a particular medium, and that's what covers me because I'm getting paid really shit in a different medium. So the pay is so different depending on the medium that you're working in as well, which is also quite a complex thing to approach. And at least from some of the research that I've done in the past, one of the biggest things that would improve pay is government funding, like direct government funding, which they are still very adamant to do because they see art as a luxury and not as a human right, a human expression. So we also need to lobby our government to pull their finger out because the industry alone cannot solve all the problems. We need consistent government input. That money was once there. That's the other thing that people forget. The money once was there. It got decimated when Conservative government came into power 14 years, however many years ago now it was. Absolutely decimated it. We saw that with theatres that had been around for 50, 75 years, 100 years, all closed down when they lost government funding. And we kind of see this repeat cycle of the little funding that trickles in will then disappear again for 10 years before it comes back again.
And just to add to that as well with TV and film, because we're seeing more consolidation of studios and companies, they are, and their bosses are still getting all these huge pay rises, but unfortunately we are going to see it is getting worse because there's less competition because they're consolidating the power now. There's less slots then, so they can kind of almost get away, unfortunately, with it, unless, like Matilda was saying, you have government intervention or different bodies get involved.
Excellent. Beautifully said. With the time as it is, I'm throwing back to you, Eleanor. How are we doing?
I think we've got time for one more quick one. I think I spotted one from Moreo, which I think is a fantastic question to end on, which is, how do you deal with the moments when you know you're being undervalued or when people play in your face generally in the industry? How do you deal or cope with feeling or being undervalued in your careers?
I'm like, how long do we have? Jackie, do you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, I because of, especially in TV and film as well, it's such a long kind of period that you're working with that person or that company. It's so important to have the people who you feel get you and are on your side. And I do think don't be afraid to walk away. I've walked away from projects because the relationship's not working, because it's got to be a two-way street. If you don't feel like you're being valued, yeah, I guess it depends on what the situation you're in, obviously project by project. Sometimes you can down tools, which we've done before. Off the back of my agent is very good at kind of being quite sort of, not afraid to kind of say, yeah, she's not going to do this now, or kind of, I just think it's hard, especially if you're a newer writer, to be able to kind of, sometimes you just feel like you're lucky to be in the room, but you are the kind of product, and your work is the product that they need. So it's sometimes trying to remember that and making sure that you're in the right partnership and you both kind of working, together for the same kind of end, really.
Yeah, I'd add finding other writers. I've got like my tribe of writers that I go to where we vent, we rant, we cry, and then we set the worlds ablaze together. So like having people that you can rely on. I also have a very supportive family. But even if you don't have that, like trying to find people whose work vibes with you. I remember a writer once told me, what does your workspace look like? Is it inviting? Have things around your workspace that remind you why you're doing this? Is it photos of friends and family? Is it quotes from favorite books or characters and things like that? Is your workspace an inviting space for you to come and sit and, kind of let go and tell the stories that you know you can tell? But having in-person real life people that can come over for movie night and rant about why was this film made? Look how much their budget they gave to this shit film. Like having those moments with your writer friends also feels really valuable as well. I'm reminded that I'm not just doing this because I want to tell stories, I want to make a lot of money. It's also because I love the people that I'm surrounded by. They're a great bunch of people, and I couldn't imagine not being surrounded by these people.
Yeah, and just to agree, finding allies with either on the production itself as well, even just like one ally could help. And sometimes we do have to listen to notes. We do have to take notes. A lot of times we're also, I think, we've got to deal with quite harsh notes and almost what may feel like criticisms on not just our style, but sometimes our person, because we really honestly believe in what we're writing and the characters that we've written on the page. So sometimes stepping away from that and reminding ourselves, like Matilda said, actually, like Matilda has said, as to number one, why I'm writing this, but also what you have to give, what you have to offer, your value, and then going back and then taking those notes on the chin and then just giving it another good run in a sense. And yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody. What a fantastic note to end on, talking about community and finding your people. That's so important always to hear. And just and nice to be reminded as well, I think, that the New Black Film Collective is an excellent organisation to help writers find that community, as are the Writers Guild of Great Britain. If anybody is interested in knowing a bit more about our organisations, my colleague Niharika is putting some links into our chat, so please do go and have a look at those. Thank you so much to our fantastic panelists for being here with us this evening, and a huge thank you to Priscilla and to everybody at the New Black Film Collective for putting this event together with us. It's been an absolutely fantastic discussion, and it's been fantastic to see so many people here. So thank you everybody for coming. We hope that you have a lovely evening, and that we hope to see you at another event very soon.